Hey, everybody, you're listening to Vegan Theology with Kevin and Sarah Hale.
Hello. We're so excited. We are talking with Lisa Kemmerer today. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Kemmerer. I guess you go by Dr. K to your students.
Whatever's easiest. My last name is not easy, so I just always invite people, call me Lisa. Anything that works for you is fine with me.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for being here. We're beyond excited.
Oh, yeah.
So am I. This is terrific.
Our listeners know that you are the author of the book that we've been working through now for a couple months. And hopefully today we can put a person to the book and make that human connection with you and your experiences as an activist and as an educator. And so I wanted to just refresh our listeners' minds in terms of the work you've done. Lisa Kemmerer has a bachelor's in international studies from Reed College, a master in theological studies in comparative religions from the Harvard Divinity School, a PhD in philosophy from the University of Glasgow in Scotland, and I believe your emphasis was on animal ethics with that PhD, is a philosopher, activist, artist, and lover of wild places who has hiked, biked, kayaked, backpacked, and traveled widely. Kemmerer recently retired as Associate Professor of Philosophy and Religions at Montana State University, Billings.
Go Yellow Jackets.
Where are you all located?
Bozeman.
Yeah, we're in Bozeman.
Oh, I wish I'd known about you when I was in Billings, right?
Oh,
I know.
I know.
Lisa is internationally known for her work in animal ethics, and she is the founder of the information sharing nonprofit Tapestry, which we're going to learn more about today. I'm really excited about the work you're doing there. You taught in Montana for 20 years. You've written more than 100 articles / anthology chapters and 13 books, including Vegan Ethics, A More in Search of Consistency, Animals and World Religions, the book that we've been going through, Sister Species, and Eating Earth. Also, a whole book on animals and Christianity and another book on animals and Judaism. And both of those books, I believe, have your artwork, your paintings on the cover of those.
They do.
So beautiful.
That's awesome.
There's a beautiful image of a turkey and a portrait of 2 lambs on one of them. As I was rereading your biography today online, I was getting so emotional. It's just such an honor to be talking with you, and I do consider you a hero. I think that every once in a while, when I think we get low, you can really start to feel lonely. And it's just so nice to find someone who I can look up to and be like, I want to be like her. I want to channel you. So,
Well, Sarah, the work you're doing, my work's nothing unless it reaches people. Nothing. And one of the things you asked about is my work and how it. I can't remember how you worded it, but how are my books received or something? And that's where, your podcast is amazing. I couldn't believe it when I listened to it.
oh wow,
You've just taken the important stuff and presented it to people. And this is what I'm all about: getting the information out there. And the book Amore, I want to get it online for free. I want this information. That's why I retired. I've been at this a long time. There's a lot of information in my head. It is going to die with me.
Right.
My interest is in making it so that it is accessible to people and to get it out there so that anybody that's interested can and will hopefully find it. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. One thing, you have had such an adventurous, full life. You've been all over the world. You've pedaled from Washington to Alaska. And one thing it jumped out at me is you've been able to travel places and then write books based on your experiences in those places. I was thinking probably anthropologists are like that, and archaeologists are like
Journalists,
that.
maybe.
They actually go places and then write books about those experiences. But I don't know how usual that is in academia in general, that people actually have on the ground street experience with other places and other people, and then they get to put it in a book. But even with this book that we've been discussing, I read that you earned the Watson Fellowship that took you traveling for 2 years, exploring the place of women and animals in religion in Asia, Europe, and the Fertile Crescent. The fellowship allowed you to venture to remote monasteries, temples in China, spend a month at the Dalai Lama's school in North India, stay with Palestinians and visit patients at a West Bank hospital and visit holy sites in Israel, and even go into Egypt and Turkey. Through travel, Dr. K came to see her way of living and thinking as just one among many. Can you say more about that? Getting to see a human face attached to all of these different religions. What have you learned by studying across all of these traditions?
Well, I suppose I was a reluctant scholar. I'm high energy, and I suppose was born with an adventuresome spirit. So reading books was never my forte, and I dropped out of college after my first year. And I just wanted to learn. I wanted to really learn, and I just wasn't getting it at college. It wasn't. I wasn't learning what I wanted to learn. The things that really matter in life, they weren't there in the classroom. So I worked for a summer and as forest firefighter, and took that money that I earned. And I wasn't even an adult yet when I wasn't even 18. And I flew across the ocean, and away I went. I remember telling my dad and mom, I'm going to go on a big trip. And Dad laughed and said, no, you're not. And mom said, wow, good.
Oh, wow.
That was my two parents. I have my mother's adventuresome spirit and my father's philosophical side. And,
nice.
So anyway, that my travels were absolutely essential. And I would say that my main interest in that first trip was learning about religions. I just was so interested in what other people believed and how they expressed that. And one of the things I learned on that trip is that to some extent, everybody else's religion is, maybe we think it's more interesting than our own. And sometimes people will get disillusioned and switch religions.
Yeah.
But that's not the thing to do. Religions are all beautiful. They're about the people that are in them. So if you're seeing problems in your religion, do what you're doing.
Yeah.
Change it, work on it, because the religion's beautiful, and how people express it can and will change if we work at it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is amazing. For example, I'll just pull out the obvious example, which would, I think, for a Christian is Islam. We're so used to hearing all the negative things about Islam and how all the violence and all the lack of civil rights or women's rights or, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was thinking about that similarly. People could come up with just as much evidence along the same lines in Christianity, in the church, the history of the church and all the violence. And
Yes, absolutely.
So I think that's along the lines of what you're saying is the religion itself has so much inherent beauty that just looking at a small group of representative humans isn't necessarily accurate.
And I'll say something even stronger, that beauty is at the core of the religion, and that anything that is oppressive or hurtful or harmful or arrogant or aggressive is superfluous. It's smaller. It's a minor. So if you're looking, you can find something in the text that will tell you to oppress women. You can find it in there.
Yeah.
But you will never, it is not anywhere near as strong as the teaching of, say, in Christianity, love, or in the Hindu tradition, ahimsa. So, of course, there's oppression of women across the board. But again, at the very core is the teaching of caring and goodness that should override that. And it just doesn't, because those in power have an interest in not paying attention to that. So again, people like you are out there saying, hey, this is a beautiful religion. What are you doing?
Right. I think you have a quote in your introduction, and I can't remember who said it, but if every religion were to remember its heart, if proponents of a religion could remember the religion's heart, it would look so much different than how people are actually nominally living out their particular religion.
Yeah. And I would have to say, when I started studying religions, I would never have guessed that they supported animal liberation. Never in a million years.
Right.
I knew they were beautiful. I just had no idea across the board how beautiful. So that was one of the absolutely, you can't make it any more worthwhile than that. I mean, what a wonderful thing to discover.
And speaking of beautiful, you have a website that you've created, animalsandreligion.org.
You found it.
Yes, I did. And the website itself is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's well done. Yeah.
It's attractive. Like, I want to be on this website. I want to explore this website. It's just so, the images, the artwork, everything about it is really beautiful.
Thank you. So this is why I retired. I mean, I could have sat there in my tenured professor job and had a much easier life. Instead, now I got rid of that to work for free so that I could do things like this. And the trouble with it is I have to do everything. I have to do editing and fundraising and social media, which I just plain don't do.
Right.
So that website isn't live yet, but I'm working on it. I have to get enough funding. Hopefully we can launch in June. But I'm doing the work, the grant's written, and it's sent out to some places. So there's hope for it, but it's a slow process. And the frustrating thing is I know my strengths, and it's not any of this administrative stuff. So I'm also working on trying to get a team together that can make this happen. I don't have, fundraising. That's about as not my thing, right? And
right.
I love how you guys go after capitalism, and that's me right to the core. Yeah, that's great stuff. I just love, as I say, you guys are fearless. It's wonderful.
We're waiting for the shooter job. No, I was kidding.
I know how you feel.
Well, it's like, I'm sure right now we're so tiny, and I'm like,
we're not a threat.
We haven't received any hate from anybody, but
well, no, but we know activists here who 10 years ago got they were going after ranchers and that kind of thing, and they got some pressure, they got some pushback, and so we haven't gotten anything. But anyway.
And you shouldn't ever. What you're doing is not hurting anyone. You're sharing information.
Yeah.
Right.
And if that's a threat to someone, they need to take a look inside, and that's kind of what the message they need to receive.
Yeah.
I would love to. I'm not sure if you noticed. You mentioned you have listened to our podcast, which thank you so much. What an honor!
That's
but
awesome.
I'd like to listen to more.
One of this past year's awakenings, for speaking for myself, has been an examination of the Zionism that I was brought up in my conservative church, and becoming a little bit more aware of the Palestinian people and the history there. The fact that you spent time in the West Bank with Palestinians, could you tell us a little bit more about what you saw, what you experienced, what that was like there?
I found people so generous, a culture so beautiful. When I would stay with people in their homes, and they wouldn't let me sleep anywhere but in their bed. And so it made it hard for me because I didn't want to stay with people if they were going to give me their bed. I can sleep anywhere. I mean,
right.
So, but the heart, the kindness, the generosity of the spirit in those, and every culture is going to have every kind of people, but I found a tremendous amount of beautiful people. And that's the first place, I don't remember how old I was, but it was the first place that I realized I had become mature in the sense that when I saw suffering, it affected me in ways I did not expect. So I took emergency medicine when I was younger, and I just was, I dealt with life and death situations before, but when I walked into a hospital, which wasn't, you'd hardly call it a hospital, I saw somebody about 17 or 18 year olds lying in a bed who'd just been shot and was between life and death. And I had to sit down so that I wouldn't faint, because I was just so pained by the senseless destruction of this life. And I didn't know if he would make it back, and I'll never know if he lived or not. But I felt something different in myself, a maturity about what it means to be shot. And our culture goes out of its way to make sure we don't think about these things. Our media is so violent.
Yeah.
Right.
But to actually witness somebody who had suffered from a gunshot wound, one single gunshot wound, it was just so emotionally moving. You couldn't piece it all together. What are we doing?
Yeah.
is the thought that comes to your mind. What are we doing? Why shoot someone? What are we thinking?
Right.
And the answer is we're not. It's powers above commanding people who are quote unquote below them to do things that they probably themselves don't really understand. Soldiers are very young. Yeah. They haven't reached the where you're aware of that, what life means and what it looks like to see someone whose life has just been destroyed by violence.
Sometimes it just hits you all like in a fresh way. Like, war is so stupid. Like, how are we still in a situation where we think war is the solution,
right,
or that war is a good idea? Like, there has to be better ways.
It just seems so expensive. Like, we talk about return on investment. You have all these capitalists trying to maximize their money, but this is one way that, we're wasting money.
Yes. Anyway. And as a feminist, I want to say again, this is because we're not ruled by women. It's not an eco-feminist philosophy that's guiding us. We are guided by a power over structure where those with might are right and they can more or less achieve what they want. And it is not anything close to what our religions or even our secular ethics are teaching, but we don't seem to make that connection.
Yeah.
I just want to say, that's what I think I love about your resume and your bio is you're a boots on the ground kind of person, but you're also a philosopher. And I just love that. I mean, it's this amazing intersection. It really is. I mean, the fact that you know emergency management stuff, the fact that you know forestry, I mean, the fact that you've been kind of like a cultural anthropologist around the world, and then you write about you're a philosopher connecting ethics to action. It's inspiring to me. And I mean, it's one of the things that, I don't know, I don't want to go off in too much of a rabbit hole, but I think it's the biggest challenge for our church, the Christian church, is this, we got too many people sitting on the sidelines, just waiting for God to do something. And yet we are God's hands and feet. Anyway, you really inspire me. So I love it.
Thank you. And you know, that is something in the new book, Animals and Christianity. That's something that I tackle, is that Christian idea of the Pauline idea that you just sit back and watch it happen. It kind of covers the history of how that came to be. And of course, how wrong-headed it is.
Can't wait to read it.
The other thing, well, this is why I hope so you will get to it. And it also covers the sacrifice, which I don't cover in religion. It wasn't one of the topics. And it's so easy to cover that. I mean, one of your podcasts, you say, that's a whole can of worms. No, really. If you want it in one sentence, it's you can reduce it down to, are you kidding me? You think that an ancient ritual 2,000 years ago that no longer exists somehow justifies you buying flesh from a contemporary market? Really? Seriously? It's not even connected.
Oh, man.
Interesting. All right.
There we go. Yes, you've piqued our interest with that book.
Absolutely.
We're definitely going to take a look at that.
Yep.
I'd love to talk more about your work now with Tapestry and all that is involved with that. You mentioned that you retired in order to become a full-time social justice activist. I'm sure that work has taken up a ton of your time. You also mentor people. You volunteer several times a week at a local shelter, and you work with local restaurants to put vegan options on the menu.
That's the most interesting initiative, I think, that I have been involved in of late.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'm so thrilled with that expenditure of time and energy. It was minimal for outcome.
Okay.
And the key to it, so, you know, we have vegan groups doing this, kind of going out to restaurants and trying to get vegan foods. And I talked to some people about what they were doing, and I just thought, no, this isn't going to work very well. Nobody's really that interested in the word vegan doesn't have the pull of something like inclusiveness. You know, if you say, do you want to go vegan? No. Do you want to be inclusive? Yes. They're not going to say no to that. A business is not going to say no to that. So the hospitality challenge is what I called it. And I went out to local restaurants and I just talked to them about inclusivity. I talked to them about lactose intolerance and racism involved in not having milks available or charging more for people.
Yeah. Right.
So I didn't make it about the animals because I knew they didn't care. I made it about people and they had to care.
Right.
And one of the restaurants now has a vegan menu, an entire menu.
Wow.
And, went around first and I just got, I said, can I get you to become part of this? And I got 8 or 9 restaurants that were interested, and all of them had to put, to be part of it, one dessert and one dish on their menu, priced, so you don't have to go in and start finagling to try to get a meal.
Exactly.
And I tried to explain to them, people get tired of that. We don't want you to give us the same thing with 5 different ingredients pulled out, and then we pay the same.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
It isn't. So just put it on your menu, give it a price, make it available, be inclusive, be hospitable.
Genius.
And it was really successful. And so and it's not my thing, right? I don't like going around. It was miserable for me having to do these social things, to go around and find managers and talk to them. But
Wow.
at the end of the day, it was definitely worth it.
That's
No,
beautiful.
that's huge. Yeah, that's amazing.
That just makes me laugh. It's like, as an introvert, speaking for myself, it's like some of these things are so painful. I'm like, why am I doing this? I'd rather do anything else. But something drives us to do it.
Well, yeah.
The passion or the vision. Yeah.
Right. I had to eat out. I never eat out. I don't want to eat out. It costs so much more. I have to sit out in public and try to eat. I just want to eat my own little foods right here, simple and quick, and get right on with what else I'm doing. And so, yeah, I had to eat out, which was part of the misery of it for me. But I have to say,
Wow.
I kind of got to know a lot about my local community. I kind of lived like a hermit out here in my recluse, just doing my writing and here with my dogs and cats. So
yeah,
it was probably good for me too.
Sure. Yeah.
I would think it would help your ministry as well, or tapestry, or whatever you are doing. I mean, you're connecting with your community, and you're connecting that ministry to your community. So I would think it's a win-win.
Maybe I didn't ever mention, because I was purposefully not letting them know anything about my interest in animals. I needed them to believe what they were doing was the right thing to do for human beings. So I don't know. And anyway, tapestry can't be local. It's no one around here. It's like being at MSUB when I first came there in about it must have been about 2000. Just people didn't even know what the word vegan meant.
I can believe that. Some still don't. In fact, I told somebody here in Montana I was vegan. They said, "Isn't that illegal in Montana?"
Great.
Tell us more about tapestry and what you're envisioning for that.
Well, information sharing. So as I say, I've got, I don't know how many years, let's say 40 to 45 years of being active in this movement. And so I want to give back that information before I die. I want to get it out there, and I want it to be free. And publishing books are expensive, and they're also just in English. And so I want to get some of this information, like the animalsandreligion.org website. I want to get it out where anyone in the world who can get on the internet can find it. And Amore is kind of the culmination of, in my writing, I went from just being a narrow-minded animal activist when I was a kid to connecting that with religions when I was in my doctoral work and religion environment, to then writing about it and becoming intersectional and recognizing all the connections with other social justice issues. And so Amore pulls those together. All the books before, I did the one that you looked at on religions. I did a couple on women. I've done a couple on environment. And this Amore pulls them all together. And Amore, of course, in Italian is love. It's deep kind of love. And the A is for animals, the M is for medical, the O is for oppressions, the R is for religion, and the E is for environment. And they're all in there. All of those topics are in one book, covered as succinctly as I could. So it's a book. It's cheap. It's like $10, which I want to keep it at. I did not publish it with a publisher who would jack up the price, but keeping it really cheap. And I want to put it on a website, just like the animalsandreligion.org. I want that information to be accessible to anyone that's out there. So, and of course, even just selling the book, it bothers me, but the money does go to Tapestry, every penny of it. So back into trying to get information out there. So Tapestry has 3 threads, and one is the academic thread, and that's the mentoring and the writing, the research and writing. And one of them is the hands-on, and that's the going to the restaurants and showing up at shelters and doing rescue. I live in an area where, I find individuals who need to go, and people can also call me, and I will take them to the wildlife rehab place, which is at least an hour away. So these kind of hands-on things of being involved in rescuing and transport. And the final third is the arts. So connecting poetry and visual arts, which I've always been very much a part of my soul, turning those into activist works. And I recently have had a couple displays that are local. I got to put them right in the library. Oh, my delight in seeing these pictures of farmed animals with labels on them, tags, titles that just say, they make people think. They say, oh, what a cute little bird. They go up and look at it, and it said something like, Scarlett was happy she was born in a vegan household.
Right.
Or, a cow that says something like, even the jackals offer the breast and nurse their young, but my people have become cruel, Lamentations from the Bible.
Wow.
So it's just a very, for me, now that I've retired, I can be a whole person. I can have the arts, I can have the hands-on, on the boots on the ground stuff, and I can still continue the research and writing and try to get it out there. And, for me, most of us ask at some point what our lives are about.
Yeah.
I asked it very young, very, very young. And I remember when I turned 30, I said, okay, I'm 30 now. It's time to start giving back. I've had all these wonderful things. I've gotten to travel. I've gotten an education. Now I need to give back. And so since then, that's what I've been doing, is trying to give back what I've gotten and make it accessible to others, and to leave the world a little better than I found it.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you were thinking that early, I'm serious, because...
Yeah, that's not typical. In fact, I think Kevin and I tend to sometimes feel a little bad. Like, okay, we're in our 50s, and we feel like we're just now starting to wake up. Like, what have we been doing with our conservative Christian lives?
Right.
Like, oh my goodness.
Good for you. Good for you. It's harder when you're 50, so good for you. Right? For me, it was easy. I was young. Young people are open to new ideas, much more generally. Not all of them, but many of them. To some extent, I take my hat off more to you to make the swing that you've made. Good for you.
Wow.
Thank you.
And conservative too. I mean, that.
Right. I know.
Challenging.
It is. And it's so fun. It's funny. I made a comment to someone at work. I said something about being, these right-wing animal activists. And they were like, are there right-wing animal activists? Because I was like, I still have this conservative, culturally, I consider myself conservative.
He thinks he's still conservative.
I know, but when I tell people I'm vegan, they're like, you flaming liberal. So anyway, and I get all kinds of things. But it's funny. Yeah, it's weird how in my mind, I still think of myself as a conservative, but
good.
Probably
That's
not.
Good. But here's the thing, right? In this movement, if you're conservative, generally it means you're narrow-minded. So I know from your podcast you're not. This is super important. It's hurting the movement that there are so many people. I mean, I heard it when I was younger, and I only cared about animals, and I didn't make the connection for people. I was as narrow-minded as any loudmouthed activist could be. And so it is super important that we not keep repeating that process. There's now so much more information out there about interconnections. And I'm so happy that you are doing that with your podcast. And I encourage you, do more of it. Just keep that front and center in the work that you're doing. No. And the other thing I would say with your podcast, you had asked me if I have any advice. Yeah, there is one bit of advice. Don't just focus on vegan, right?
Okay. Well, what do you mean by that?
So I'm old. So when I first started caring about the oppression of animals, it was research that was the main thing, and fur. Right? They're still out there. Those oppressions are still happening. And they're both of them are extremely cruel. So at some point, the movement, I think in the 90s, shifted over to farmed animals. What we figured out was sheer numbers. There are more of them dying, and to some extent it's easier to change individuals, but the lab animals are still out there dying, and it's just as egregious, and it's connected with environment. I mean, they're shipping monkeys, primates from other places, harming other ecosystems,
right?
And so birds, rodents. They're not even protected by any. There is no animal welfare that protects them. Nothing. They could do anything they want to them. So, just kind of, find a way to plug in and learn about these other issues and please bring them in, draw them in to help people so that if ever there is a way that people can bring change, again, at the supermarket, we can reject animal products. We can also reject any leather and fur products just as readily. Now, the other, like entertainment is another focus. So those research and entertainment, well, you can choose your entertainment and you can choose which products you buy to go what they call cruelty-free. Nothing is cruelty-free. We're humans and yeah. So, but anyway, the point is you can choose better or worse.
Right.
So please, why not broaden your scope in that way as well?
Yeah.
I think vegan focus is fine, but don't hesitate to mention these other issues occasionally because those animals need our help too.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
I always struggle to articulate this, but I feel like the trajectory we're on is one of it's almost like once you start seeing one oppression, once you start dismantling your own, I don't know, we'll just say white privilege, or once you start taking apart the narrative you've been given, you start seeing new things everywhere. You start becoming more sensitive across the board. This is what I'm experiencing. Things that I never really gave a thought to. The Israeli-Palestine thing is just one example of many where I feel like we're starting to just become more sensitive and more aware that we've kind of been blind.
Yes, I hear that in your podcast. It's wonderful. You have definitely reaching out beyond animals, and that's super important. I love that about your podcast. You involve different, and it's all connected. It is all connected. If you have a kind heart, you won't be doing what we're doing overseas.
That just makes me think of the propaganda machine, because I think Sarah, her and I have talked about this growing up in a conservative church, the Zionist view of Israel. It's just what we've been told for our entire lives as children, all the way to, and now we're 50 years old and we're going, this doesn't add up. We're annihilating these people. And so that's just one example of many examples. And it's just the propaganda machine in the United States is just unbelievable. It's every once in a while you hear some missionary say, we don't hear that kind of stuff where we are living in this part of the world, or what we are hearing is very different from what you're hearing in the United States. So it's like there's this very deliberate propaganda machine happening here.
It's true. And again, this is where traveling young, not only just seeing in Palestine that young man that had been shot, but seeing the poverty in India, you can't imagine it. You just, you walk into one of those slums and it's just, I was a teenager. I never grew up. I never imagined I'd see children and mothers, families living in cardboard boxes with, outside all together, a bunch of cardboard and cloth and, trying to cook on a little bit of fire, some food and begging and, just the things that challenged me to deal with. It's very stressful. I would never have called it that at the time. I wasn't old enough to figure out yet what it was doing to me, but it was, it opened my eyes.
I'm sure it was so impactful at such a young age. And then to come back to the United States, to the conspicuous consumption.
Yes.
It's very hard.
Yes, that's right. And again, I just, I mentioned I'm speaking on an old flip phone. I'll never have a smartphone if I can possibly, unless I absolutely have to get one for some reason for my activism.
Yeah.
I just keep things to a minimum. I don't need a lot. I got a lot of work to do, and I've got doggies who need to be walked and kitties who want to be played with and petted. So I have plenty of entertainment here. All good.
Yeah.
Speaking of your dogs, there's this photo of you on your website, and it looks like a dog has jumped up into your arms, and it almost makes me cry when I look at this photograph because this dog looks so happy. This dog is so in love with you.
It's mutual. It's so mutual. Yeah. You could say God gave us these beings to teach us, to remind us, to show us how to love, because we forget when we grow up, and they don't.
I know. There's something very
Well,
spiritual about them.
yes.
Oh, so I was just going to say right above the photo is a quote that I think kind of lines up with what we were just talking about is those who seek greater justice in our world need to work toward a deeper understanding of oppression. That's been really resonating with us too, is that whatever religion you are, focusing on the oppressed is key. It's the heart to stand up against oppression, against the oppressors, and stand up for the oppressed, whoever they are.
And this is where ecofeminism is so beautiful. It helps us understand that that they are connected. They are connected because when you have a mindset of power over, it will affect women. It will affect the poor. It will affect those who have different forms of sexuality. It will affect those who have their bodies are different in one way or another. So if you have a mindset that is kind and loving, then you won't have that kind of a problem. And boy, again, when I was younger, in fact, I think it's in Sister Species, I would have basically said that the suffering of animals is greater than the suffering of women. And as a woman, I can say that. I would never throw anybody else under the bus, but I shouldn't have thrown women under the bus. It's connected. You can't have one protected. And the hardest book I ever wrote was Oppressive Liberation that came out in 2023. And looks at the movement and sexism in the movement. And it's extremely important because we can't get anywhere when we're propping up oppression. We can't help animals if we're oppressing women. And we are. The movement is. And that book has hard evidence that shows that. So that was very hard. And this is the movement I spent my whole life working with. And I also knew I was going to need to ask for funding. And I went after the funders that were funding people that were doing this. And I knew at the time I was, chopping off my own toes, but I also knew I needed to do it. It's just being an activist. You've got to speak truth.
Right.
You've got to speak truth to power.
I think I just saw that title today and I was like, wow. Again, I hope we can have future conversations. I feel like there's just a lot to talk about with you.
I'm certainly spread thin in the sense that if there's a topic in the movement, I've probably spent some time researching it.
No, exactly.
And it's more by chance than design. I just was the wanderer. I wandered overseas and I also wandered around the movement. So it's in my nature, I guess.
Yeah. It's sad, though. It's sad that you'd have to write a book like that. So we got to read that.
It was terribly sad. The evidence that I uncovered is that 80% of this movement is female, and we're hurting our own activists. We're clipping their wings. We are in so many ways, not just philosophically, but actually physically, mentally, we are hurting our own activists.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm really interested.
It's a big fat book, and it costs way too much because, I went through a publisher one, and I need to never go through a publisher again, although that has its drawbacks too. But I'm happy to talk about it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we'll get it. We'll read it, and we'll have a future discussion. That'd be amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you wrote that book because these oppressive systems don't just, I guess, magically disappear even within an activist movement, and we need to clean it out. We need to clean out the movement. We need to clean out the church. We need to,
there's a lot of work.
Yes, that's right. And the first thing is we have to see it. You can't fix something you haven't faced. So, and that's why you're doing what you're doing. And that's why I do what I do. We have to first get people to see what's going on, and then maybe we can have change.
As we all know, right, there's such a thing as activism burnout. When you're swimming upstream every day of your life, it is exhausting and it's alienating. And how do you measure success? Kevin and I look at each other sometimes and we're like, whose lives have we changed? I think it's more than just one question. One would be,
how do you deal with burnout?
How do you keep going? What inspires you? And how do you keep from getting discouraged? But maybe the flip side of that coin is, how do you measure your success? Like what is the criteria for knowing if
you're making an impact?
Yeah.
I suppose maybe the two answers to that are that I don't measure my success. I just do what I need to do and trust that some way, somehow, that information will get into hands like yours. And that's why I can't tell you how thrilled I was to hear your podcast. It's like, wow, somebody actually found my work and made it accessible. That is so cool. affirming, and I hardly ever have affirmation.
Oh, that's
but
great.
I don't look for it. I just do my work.
Mm.
And burnout doesn't happen because I'm interested in the ideas and I care about, I guess my friends would say I'm a person of endless hope. And I have to say a lot of it's just genetics. I was born happy.
Mm. That's awesome. I guess one idea that came out for me, there was like, how do you recharge?
Doggies, kitties,
yeah.
doggies, and my walks. It's essential to me that I get out for at least an hour's walk every day. And just look at the world and how beautiful it is. And to me, that's just so important. And I'm also aware that's my privilege. I live in a place where when I go for a walk, I have nature all around me. And that's not by chance, it's by design. I need that to recharge and to stay healthy. And I feel for anyone who needs that and can't find it. We have parks, but it would not be the same for me. But then I grew up rurally. So, and I would also say there's no question I have the PTSD that's normal for people that have been in this movement a long time and have been subjected to suffering and are sensitive. There's no question I would be a lighter person if I had never noticed what was going on. But it was inevitable that I would see it and feel it. So it couldn't have been any other way. And the trick is to make sure you balance your life with keeping healthy. And again, walks are everything. I think whatever else you do, get out for a walk, get out of see the world, and if you live in town, see other people, see something other than what can be very painful, looking at the suffering that you're trying to work against. And also, I would say, don't subject yourself to the suffering. Once you're in the movement, once you've made the changes, you don't need to keep looking at those images, and you should not. Do not. And that's something, again, that the movement was very wrong-headed about when I was younger. We felt obligated to see it, to see the suffering. What a mistake. I didn't need to see that. I wasn't causing it. You need to know enough about it to relate to others, whatever you need to relate. And you can do that through words. You don't need to see the actual images. So protect yourself. Wow. Protect yourself because it is painful.
Wow.
And we can't bring change if we're suffering too much ourselves. It makes it hard to stay in the movement and keep working. So find your solace, whatever that might be.
Oh, that is so key. That's so beautiful. I'm so glad you said that because, well, it even reminds me of so many of the chapters you wrote in Animals and World Religions. How many of these religions, people who are following or devoted to these religions, intentionally sought out nature, spending that time. It was just integral to their spirituality.
Yeah.
And the fact that we believe that God created the world good and with so much variety and so much life. So, that makes perfect sense that it feeds our souls and keeps us going. And you're such a good example of that.
And, if you can't find a bit of woods to wander around in or a green park, you can find it in a leaf. You can find it in a plant. Even a plant inside a building if you need to. You can ponder the peacefulness and the beauty and the life that is there growing. So we have to find ways, wherever we live and whatever environment we're in, to nurture ourselves with the world that we're part of, because we are part of it and our heart does resonate with it if we're listening.
Wow.
Yeah, that's resonating on such a deep level. Yeah. I'm going to keep that close to my heart. Thank you.
Yeah. I know you mentioned you do mentoring for activists because you've been in it for a long time and you provide, that's one of the services you provide. And can you just talk about that? How does that work? How much does that run? How much does that cost?
It's free. And I have so far never had to say no. So and the way I make that work is I do it when I'm out walking. Yeah. I'll just take a phone call. And I haven't stopped walking since we started talking. I'm just pacing around.
Wow.
My brother says I'm not a human being, I'm a human doing. So again, I was born with high energy levels. So mentoring, all people have to do is ask. And, they need to be in the movement and they need to be aware of my work so that it's focused on something that I focus on.
Yeah.
And then they just send me an email and say, hey, I want to talk about such and such. And so I've worked with activists and helped them focus on what I think might be helpful for what they're doing. And I've worked with students who are working on PhDs and need help thinking through ideas. And just whoever connects with me, I'm always happy to help people in the movement.
That is very generous of you. Seriously. That's huge.
Well, it doesn't cost me anything. Why would I be stingy with what I've had the privilege of learning?
Yeah, we'll be reaching back out.
Good. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
You're doing so much good work. You're doing a wonderful job. Why would I not want to do everything I can to help you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just love this quote that it's from your book. It says, committing to a plant-based diet anticipates and participates in the return of God's peaceful kingdom. And I think for Christians, I just love that. It's so perfect because the idea of anticipating and participating, because I think that's where we think we're going to end is in a peaceful kingdom. And I just love the quote. I love it so much that I put it on our Instagram by you. So
Wonderful.
Yeah, it sums things up so nicely.
And nothing frustrates me more than those who are just waiting for the new world and are completely indifferent. I mean, how do you even get there? This world is incredibly beautiful and it's filled with sentient beings. It's such a difference. It's so un-Christian. Yeah. I can't fathom it. But when you understand the history of Pauline Christianity and how they were oppressed and they knew they were never going to, there were so few Christians at the time and they were so mistreated and all they could do was look to the world to come. So when you see it in that light, it makes sense. Wow. But to somehow argue that now that's what we should be doing it's a denial of Christianity.
Thank you.
It's an obligation of duty.
No, absolutely. I love that. And to me, I think that is the biggest challenge for the church. You have a lot of people sitting on the sidelines waiting for God to show up and get him out of here. And then he's going to clean it up like it's a big Superfund site.
Well, we know as Christians, we are to model our lives on that of Jesus. That is not what Jesus did.
Yeah, it was embodied. The word embodied. It was embodied right
Boots
now.
on the ground.
Boots
on the ground. Might have been barefooted.
Absolutely. No, and again, it comes back to the Lord's Prayer where it says, on earth.
As it is in heaven.
Exactly.
Yes.
So anyway, I love that. I love that quote by you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, when do we need a new phrase? Sandals on the ground.
There we go. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
One of the things I'm taking away from this conversation, I love the idea of I don't measure success. I just know I have work to do. I'm just going to keep doing the work.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. I'm not going to worry about figuring out a rubric by which to see if I'm effective or not. I'm just going to keep going.
I think one way to look at that is when you're raising a child or tending a cat or a dog, you don't have a rubric to decide if you succeeded. You do what needs doing. It's a love-based connection with another being that's going somewhere, and we don't know where. You just go along with your heart connected.
That's gorgeous. I think that's a perfect way to wrap up. Thank you so much, Dr. Kemmerer. Yeah. We love you. I say that from the heart, and I can't wait to just continue our friendship and our future conversations.
The feeling is mutual. I really appreciate what you all are doing. Thank you so much for the time you're putting in and the good news you're spreading.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. You all take care.
Okay.
All the best to you.
All right. Bye.
I am sure that, like Kevin and myself, you can't help but love Dr. Kemmerer. She is overflowing with joy, generosity, and love. Getting to talk with her was a pure delight. We look forward to reading her other work and having more conversations with her. Here are some of the takeaways from our conversation. Number 1, religions are beautiful. If there's a problem within your religion, work to change it. Number 2, you can't fix something you haven't faced. Number 3, God gave us animals to show us how to love, because we forget how to love when we grow up, but animals don't. Number 4, the mindset of power over brings suffering to this world. We can't get anywhere if we're propping up oppression, and all oppressions are connected. Number 5, find solace in nature. We must nurture ourselves with the beauty, peace, and life within nature. Number 6, don't measure success. Just do what you need to do. Don't look for affirmation. Just do the work. Number 7, give back, live simply, speak truth to power, and enjoy God's beautiful world. And number 8, there is no rubric for the spiritual life. It's a love-based connection. Just go along with your heart connected. As always, thank you for being here with us on this journey, and have a beautiful day.